Personal log. Stardate unknown, location unknown. I have awoken on a strange world, relieved to be breathing what seems to be the freshest air ever. Looking around me, I am surrounded by beautiful vegetation and some unknown local wildlife resembling birds. I can only assume the device I was trapped in has transported me to a different location. I'm also picking up some time displacement waves from my tricorder, dissipating away from me, that match the effect of the Guardian of Forever, which could mean that where I am could be compounded by the sheer possibilities of when I am. My initial scans reveal a type of planet slightly smaller than Earth, but with similar gravity. I'm also picking up numerous life readings and possibly a small settlement nearby. No power readings within range, so it's likely I'm on some underdeveloped planet. At nightfall, I will attempt to use the stars to attain a position and a time, hopefully. Closing his logbook, Wess examined his surroundings a second time. The forest was dense, but the sun shining through the canopy revealed a deep and vibrant green color. Roke, he thought to himself, but it couldn't be. It felt similar, but there were plants here that he had never seen on Roke, and the tricorder had revealed the diameter of this planet was much more extensive and the axis tilt far less pronounced. He pulled the little device open again, scanning to his right. A settlement of a small population of humanoids seemed to be in that direction, and he decided he should make towards it before the sun set on this unfamiliar landscape. The tricorder led him to a clearing, still some distance from the village, and Wess paused at its edge, taking in the field of flowers. They were short and sprawled out across the field. They appeared to be loosely cultivated, as if some sort of herb or medicinal plant was being farmed here. In the very center was a beautiful girl, and Wess watched her for a time. She was around 5 feet tall, with long brown hair. From under her hair protruded long, thin ears, longer than a Vulcan's. Other than her ears, she appeared to be a standard humanoid. She was wearing a medium-length dress with slits so she could kneel to pick the herbs. The slits revealed a pair of black shorts, and the dress was colored in layers reminding Wess of Neapolitan ice cream. And it had a set of deep pockets in its sides. Her hair was pulled back with a silver hairband, with a crescent moon symbol. Around her neck was a green stone hung from a silver chain. She carried a basket filled with flowers from the clearing and would walk, picking the flowers with the deepest hue of color. As she picked her herbs, Wess scanned the rest of the clearing to see if anyone else was there helping her. The field looked empty, but at the edge of the far side, the tree line parted slightly, as a giant beast lumbered awkwardly from the forest. Liz's mind raced wildly, looking for any quarter to escape. Now she wished she had paid more heed to Regis, of course. He was right. He was very rarely wrong. As the creature circled carefully in front of her looking for a moment to strike, she scanned for cover or even a weapon, but in this open clearing there was nothing but the herbs she had come to pick. Sensing how defenseless she was, the creature moved slowly forward. It was large and cat-like, but very unusual in appearance. It had been bloated from normal proportions and was a sickly purplish color. Where did this monster come from? In the open country between Arlia and Salt, she had seen medium-sized wild servals, about 15-20 pounds max, but never this large. This animal was huge, easily the largest predator she had ever seen. But it moved strangely, almost as if it was drunk or sick. She held her ground. She knew better than to turn and run. She clenched her fists, not willing to go down without a fight. With a wiggle of its hips, the creature bent low, ready to strike, its tail coiling like a spring to propel it from some unseen wall. But before the blow was struck, a blinding red light emerged from the tree line and struck the creature, throwing it backwards. Liz followed the path of the light and found the source. A young man in strange blue and black clothes stepped from the bushes and rushed to her side. She turned back to the creature, which had regained its feet and only seemed mildly stunned by the beam. Liz heard strange chirping sounds coming from the weapon, which looked to her like a gray hilt of a sword with no blade. Bringing the weapon up to bear on the creature, which was once again lunging forward, a beam of light emerged from the end of the weapon. The light, more intense this time, struck the creature, which at first seemed to resist it, but after a few seconds the creature was thrown back once more, and with a flash was gone. That was close, Wess thought. He could not believe that the creature had stood up to a full power sustained beam, without some sort of energy shielding. Something like that should be impossible. He wished he'd had an opportunity to scan the creature. He checked on the girl. She looked in shock, and then the realization hit him. He had just broken the Prime Directive. 5 minutes on an undeveloped planet, and he had emerged from the woods, phasers blazing. Like father, like son, he thought to himself. Are you all right? He asked the shocked girl before realizing the universal translator probably did not have enough to go on yet, and his words were likely gibberish to her. Wess then extended his hands, unsure as to what other action he should take. The girl reluctantly took his outstretched hand and stood up. Her words were unintelligible at first, but as the universal translators built into his communicator take over, her words became slowly clearer. What was that thing? Liz asked, unsure if he could answer. His first words certainly seemed foreign to her. I'm not sure, he responded slowly. She swears that the first part of the sentence seems a little off, almost like he's speaking her language for the first time. The stranger then asked if she was all right. She wasn't. What she just saw was not possible. It was almost as if he had a sword of light. A sword of light. Could this be the one of legend? She looked him up and down again. Strange clothes, blue in color at the top, and black the rest of the way down. On the neck she noticed there was some sort of badge of rank, little pips. Still in his hand was the sword of light, and she thought he matched closely the hero of legend that Mayor Regis had described. Wess could feel the tension as the girl stared at his still-drawn phaser. He put it away in its holster, and the girl took a deep breath, centering herself. Who are you? She asked him directly, now intensely examining him. Wess almost answered with his rank, but thought better of it. Wess is my name. A traveler, new to these lands, lost in the woods. He chose his words carefully. He could sense that she was not buying his story, and decided to add, I heard a commotion and came to see if I could help. He tried then to change the subject. What's your name? Wess asked. Liz, from the village of Arlia, just outside the forest, she said. Well, Liz, Wess replied, I am thoroughly lost. Do you think I could come with you to your village? Liz smiled. Sure. After all, I owe you one. The girl turned on her heel and headed towards a path leading out of the grove, and Wess fell in step beside her, matching her stride. The path out of the grove wove through the forest, winding left and right, but never veering too far. The bright green foliage and unique flowers made this one of the most beautiful walks of Wess's life. Wess tried not to stare at Liz too much. He had always been awkward around women. Wess had not dated much in his life. He had focused on school and then his career, but in this moment he wished he had a little more experience. She was pretty, even more so than the scenery, and as they walked, Wess became painfully aware of the awkwardness of the silence. Where are you from? Liz asked. Walking along silently with all the possibilities, Liz did not know what to ask first. The forest was located on the south edge of the continent, and she had never heard of anyone entering the forest except through the village. The Shingo forest was huge and stretched out to the cliffs hanging over the ocean. Even Liz had not gone much deeper than the grove. Going any deeper, the trees were so thick the forest was practically impossible to cut through. If anyone had come into the forest, they would have to pass through the town, and she would have known about it. But here was this man, who suddenly appeared in the forest out of thin air, seemingly. One of the reasons that she always thought the mayor's story was so outlandish was because how could someone come out of the forest that had not first come through the village? Wess was taking a long time answering her questions, she noticed, and as he glanced at her, she gave him a slight frown. This only seemed to make him more uncomfortable, which made her giggle to herself. From far away, he finally said, looking to the forest as he spoke. She was not satisfied with that answer, but could sense that he was bewildered and uncomfortable, and so she decided to drop it. He did not seem to be a threat, more like a lost puppy than a mighty warrior, but she could not deny that his sword of light had cut down the beast, and she doubted there were many warriors in the kingdom today who could have done so. She had assumed when she was younger that the sword of light must have been describing some rune force technique, But what she saw in the forest was not rune-based. It reminded her of some of the inventions that she had seen in Cross, which had been brought over from the kingdom of Liqueur. These machines, as they were called, were powered by runes, like the light crystals that people used in their homes. They could do amazing things, like burn holes slowly through rock, but those machines were large and took multiple operators to handle. Well, if he couldn't tell her where he was from, maybe he could tell her where he was going. Liz's next question was as difficult as her last. I want to go home, Wess thought, but how that could be done was unfathomable. He was not sure where he was, and furthermore, he believed it a distinct possibility that the machine had moved him not just to another place, but another time. None of the courses of the academy had prepared him to answer questions like this. He dug deep for a reply. I was on a journey of self-discovery, and, as I said, got very, very lost. Wess laughed out loud at his own words. He watched as Liz processed what he said, and she shrugged. So you do not know where you're going, and you don't know where you are. Wess scratched his chin nervously. Yes, he replied. Liz smiled at him. I wish I could say that. Personal log, supplement. Day unknown, location unknown. It's been a hell of a day. I started out my morning on duty at the Enterprise, and now, 12 hours later, I find myself sitting in an upstairs bedroom in someone's house. Liz, the girl I rescued from the forest, brought me to her village, and after a brief tour, she took me to meet her mother, who began cooking a large meal to thank me for my help. Liz seems to be the only person in town with long, thin ears, and most of the other beings are standard humanoids, very much like myself. The food was, well, satisfying, and I felt obligated to eat it all. I've regretted this action and hope the indigestion will subside so I can get some sleep later. Liz left a little while ago and searched for the village elder. Sitting upstairs in her room, I find myself at a total loss as to how to proceed. If this is the past, then the Prime Directive is even more imperative. But without thinking, I've already broken it. I cannot say that I regret doing so. There is no way I could justify in my own mind doing nothing in a situation like that. I sit hoping that my actions don't lead to some sort of paradox. Walking back to her house, Liz was very frustrated. How could it take so long to find the mayor in this tiny village? The village of Arlia had been her home most of her life. She had traveled some with her family and the mayor, and all the places in the world she had been, Arlia was the smallest. She could always feel the town pressing in on her, giving her a general feeling of claustrophobia that only increased as she got older. She didn't hate the village, it was home, and she felt like a key part of the village and its struggles. Most of all, though, she loved the forest. Mayor Regis picked up on her mood and remarked in his dry way, "My dear, are you well?" "I'm fine," she responded, and truthfully she was, but the urgency of confirming her suspicion about the strange visitor grew in her mind once again. After the meal her mother had prepared, she hesitated to leave him alone in the house, but she felt she must bring the mayor. It had taken so long to find the old man, he was having tea in the chapel, that the sense of urgency had grown into frustration. But Regis, despite her pleading and the story she had shared, was never in a hurry. You would think that after a lifetime of waiting for the fulfillment of a prophecy, he could move a little faster. Finally, they were nearing the house when he piped up again. "So, is the young man handsome?" She wheeled around to face him with her sternest gaze. Unfazed, the old man laughed and said, "Can I take that as a yes?" She felt her cheeks flush as she reached for the door. As it opened, there was Wess. They were almost eye to eye, and she felt her cheeks grow even more red. Regis laughed despite himself. Wess sat across the table from the seemingly senile old man. He laughed and carried on, frustrating Liz to no end. He interrupted constantly, not allowing any conversation to gain traction before derailing it entirely. Liz threw up her hands in frustration and stormed upstairs, proclaiming that she would return shortly. Watching her leave, Wess overheard the old man asking Liz's mother, Emile, to fetch him something that the universal translator could not quite make out. Wes turned back to the mayor and was in for quite a shock. The senile old man was gone, replaced by a grim and stern demeanor that showed none of the nonsense from before. He sat taller and suddenly radiated an intimidating presence. "Who are you, and what are your intentions here?" Regis asked. Wes stammered how to respond. He had spent some time by this point trying to come up with some sort of explanation for himself, but in the face of this man, he could not put together the words. Regis rose and walked around the table towards Wes. "All right, then," he exclaimed. "If you do not answer, then I see one of two possibilities." Wes studied the man carefully, standing next to him now. His back was noticeably straighter, and he seemed taller than before. "You are either a traveler from another world who was called here to use his sword of light to defeat the threat that faces us now." Regis paused, gauging Wes's reaction. Wes sat in stunned silence. He knew he stood out, and his Starfleet training had given him some expectations on how he would be received by an underdeveloped culture. After all, first contacts with underdeveloped cultures had been regularly documented. Growing up, Wes had read about the effect of the Horizon crew on Sigma Iota 2, and how the crew altered the pre-warp culture drastically, but he had never seen or heard of anything like this before. As Wes continued to stare, Regis moved behind his chair. "Or, you are a fraud." Before Wes could answer, Emil returned, followed closely by Liz. "Very good," Regis exclaimed effortlessly, transforming back into the seemingly senile man from a moment ago. "I am glad that you agree." "Agree to what?" Liz asked, looking at Wes. "To stay as my guest tonight, of course, since my house is much larger and I live alone, save for the maid." Regis shot Wes a little glance that said wordlessly that he was not allowed to contradict. "Also," he said, turning his attention back to Liz, "I think we had all better turn in for the night. After all, it's been a long day. For all of us. And the hour is quite late." The mayor grabbed Wes by the arm and whisked him away to the door. All the while Liz followed closely, trying to object. The mayor was having none of it, and before he could blink, Wes was out the door, looking back at Liz, who stood with her mother at the entrance to their home. The mayor continued to tug on Wes, and he was surprisingly strong, his appearance once again being deceiving. Liz stepped out to follow a few steps, and Wes looked back nervously with a silent plea, but the mayor's home was close by, and soon they were on the porch and into the house. Thrust into the house, Wes was met with total darkness. Soon a light came on in the hall, and it appeared as though Regis had lit a candle in his hand. As he led the way, lighting candles as he went, Wes noticed the flame extended from the tip of his finger. Wes had not seen it since he was a boy on Roke, but he knew exactly what it was. "Symbology," he said in awe without thinking, and Regis turned to him and smiled. "Here we call it rune force." He showed Wes the faint glowing tattoos of runes around the extended finger that glowed red. He led Wes to the fireplace, and the little flame jumped from his extended finger to the hearth, and the fire roared to life. The hearth glowed with the same runes from the tattoo, and Wes recognized them from his mother's studies. Regis sat in the left chair and motioned for Wes to sit across from him. The fire was warm, and Wes suddenly felt very tired. "Though I could see how on another world they could refer to it as symbology," Regis remarked. Wes was staring again, and Regis reached out and poked him with his cane. "You have many questions, so I'll make you a deal," he said. Wes nodded, and Regis continued. "If I answer your questions, will you answer mine?" Not waiting for an answer, Regis reached into a side table close to his chair and produced a bottle and 2 glasses. He poured the bottle, chilling the liquid as he poured it with the symbols on the bottle glowing. Symbology on this world must be pretty advanced, Wes thought to himself as he took the glass. Regis took a large sip and leaned back in his chair. "How do I know of other worlds?" Wes nodded, setting his glass down and leaning forward eagerly in his chair. "The first answer," Regis said, pointing at the frame in the Wes's hand, "is that you are not the first such traveler I have met." Grabbing a small picture frame, handing it to Wes. The photo was black and white and very old, but one of the 3 men in the picture had a mark on his forehead that Wes could not quite figure out. Wes held the picture closer to the light. The mark on the third man's head was a third eye in the middle of his forehead. Wes did not recognize the species, but he was unlike all the others in the photo, who appeared more human. It has been a long time, but I still remember our friend from the stars. He leaned over and tapped the woman's image in the picture. The second reason is that my wife, years ago, foretold the arrival of one like you here in this place, Regis explained, sitting back in his little chair. He waited again to gauge Wes's reaction, and then continued. She had a great gift of prophecy, and had a vision that a warrior from another world would arrive in time of dire need. He pointed at Wes's clothes, and that he would be donned in blue and black garb of strange make and carry a sword of light. And you think I'm this hero? Wess asked. Not just me, he said coyly, taking another sip from his glass. Wess shifted his own glass between his hands. Liz, Wess replied, and Regis nodded. After my wife's passing years ago, Liz asked me why we had settled in this village in the middle of nowhere, and I explained to her that we were waiting for you. Regis motioned to Wess with his hand. So, are you the hero or a fraud? Wess went over all the information in his mind and took a big gulp of his own glass. He sat on the table and leaned forward, folding his hands. There is a third option, he replied at length, and Regis raised his eyebrows at the notion. I am from another world, but I did not choose to come here, nor was I chosen, as far as I can tell. There was an accident, and I was brought here as a result. I would never impersonate your hero, and I knew nothing of your legend before just now. Regis smiled, but Wess could see a hint of disappointment. It pained him a little, though he did not know why. But I'm not a hero, Wess added. I do not know where I am, much less if there is any significant threat to fight. Is that all you can say? Regis asked. Wess nodded. I'm bound by law not to reveal too much of myself to anyone here if something like this ever happens to me. Regis nodded. So what are you supposed to do if this happens? He asked. Wess leaned back in his chair. Wait to be rescued? Regis rose and faced the fireplace, staring into the flames for a while. He turned around and smiled. I believe you, he said, putting Wess at ease. He walked to Wess's chair. I advise you to wait here for that rescue. In my days of adventuring, I found moving around makes you harder to find. Regis yawned, and the kind, senile-appearing man from earlier returned. I'm off to bed, he said, making his way out of the room towards the hall. Wess watched him go, and the old man paused by the stairs pointing upwards. Wess rose and went and stood with him. Sheets are in the dresser, he said, as Wess went up the stairs. At the top, Regis called him, and Wess turned around. I will tell Liz that you are not the hero, but I do not know how she will take that news. But I think it's for the best. Wess nodded, but he felt a pain of disappointment. Suddenly the last thing he wanted to do was to let Liz down. Wess went into the upstairs room and made the bed. He noticed a window facing Liz's house, and went to look through the curtains. Just as he peered out, the upstairs lights in the house went dark. Wess went to bed. He was exhausted from the day, but his mind was still reeling, overloaded. He went to sleep and had uneasy dreams for the first time in a really long time. Dreams like he had not had since he was much younger.